All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, wherever you may be in our global viewing audience. Good afternoon, folks, wherever you may be in our global viewing audience. I'm at Project 658 in East Charlotte. My name is Christopher John Scalise. Let me mute my headphones here so I can not hear myself in a loop. All right, so we are live coming to you, or I shouldn't say community access because we are actually true independent media. We're not affiliated with community access station or the any sort of media outlet here in Charlotte. Again, my name is Christopher John Scalise, Scalise Media Group, and this is our channel, charlottenow.television. And we are providing this free service to the community, the people of Charlotte, covering the city of Charlotte's town hall on the subject of data centers. It's something that has been hot in the news, and I am been blessed with being able to serve on the data center task force as well as a representative for East Charlotte, District 5. And I'm proud and honored to be able to do that for our community. Okay, so a couple quick notes here. What we got going on. We, two things. First off, we don't have a direct line to the PowerPoint from the presenters today. So what we're going to have to do is point this camera up to the screen. So it may not be the best resolution, but I'm going to try to get what I can for you. The other thing that we need to address is the audio. We were unable to get a solid line out from the PA. They basically don't have a PA system here, and I'm not sure exactly the configuration that they have. So I'm just providing the streaming content and using all my gear, but I was unable to get a direct line from the PA. So I am going to use one of these wireless microphones, and I'm going to bring it around, and I'm going to, there's how you're going to see the PowerPoint. And then I'm going to bring this microphone around, and I'm basically going to mic the room. Now, we do have a few different cameras here at our disposal. So this is our main cam. So we'll be able to show you the main room and the presentation, our panel discussion, and our presenters. And of course, we have the handy dandy audience cam because there will be a Q&A session. There we go. So we'll be able to get audience participation. Now, I think they're rather limited, it appears, in microphone gear here. So I'm just going to need to go with what I got, and I'm going to try to capture audio best I can during the presentation using these wireless microphones that I have at my disposal. The second thing I want to bring to your attention if you're watching on YouTube and or Facebook, you do have an opportunity to have your comment show up on the screen. So if you have a question or a comment, now we're not going to be reading your questions or comments here in the room. The presenters aren't going to be receiving this information. But as far as the live stream itself, you will have an opportunity to put your comment up on the screen. So a little graphic will pop up and it will pull your profile name and your profile picture and your comment limited to 400 characters, and it will come right from the YouTube feed and the Facebook feed. Now we will be we will be moderating that for content, right? So keep it clean, keep it respectful, of course. Not that I should have to say that, but this is on the internet, and people have a tendency to just start flaming, right? So we want to make sure that we're respectful, keeping it civil, or we're not going to put your comment up on the screen. So we're not going to interrupt the presenters with this, and we're not going to block the presenters with this, but we'll move the camera, move the presenter off to the side, and we'll pull your comment up. So please feel free, jump in now, wherever you're looking at me from. Come on in, put a comment in the thread underneath the live stream. Tell us where you're watching from, and tell us what your main concerns are regarding data center developments, not just in Charlotte, because we have a global audience, of course, but wherever you may be, right? We want to hear from you, your thoughts on the subject. All right. And a few little thoughts on who we are and why we're doing what we're doing. As I showed you, those of you that know me, maybe have been following me for a while. I have been on the internet for many, many years. My company is Scalise Media Group. You can find me on Facebook. We are building a brand new brand and website, which will be launched sometime soon. No real definitive date on that. Also, I am one of the founders of this Stop East Charlotte Data Center Group. So, in full disclosure, I own a home in East Charlotte and found out about a proposed data center not a mile from my house, got involved with activism, and decided to help launch this Facebook group. And we've been very involved in activism and waking up our community, and over 300 members and growing, and we want to see you there. Let me go ahead and pull that back up if you'd like to join us online. So, wearing a lot of hats here tonight, and not the least of which is my journalism hat. Yes, I have a little bit of a biased viewpoint, as we all do. We all have opinions on this, but I'm not going to be chiming in on the broadcast here. We're going to let the presenters do their thing, and we are just here as independent media serving you, the good people of Charlotte, because this is so important. We have to amplify citizen voices. We just do, because one of the issues that we're having here is transparency and openness, right? Whether it's records, documentation, the people that are speaking for and representing the people. I'm hearing some audio, so I'm going to go ahead and stop jibber jabbering here. We're going to go to our title slate, and I think we're going to get going here in just a minute. You are watching live coverage of state of our environment. We're talking data centers tonight. This is a City Hall official presentation hosted by and facilitated tonight by Councilwoman Dimple Ajmera. So we're looking forward to getting this thing rolling. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the slate, and we'll be back with you with the presentation for the next 2 hours here in just a moment. Again, my name is Christopher John Scalise, my company, Scalise Media Group, and of course, you're watching this live stream on charlottenow.tv. Independent community media. Tonight, data centers and our future. You are watching CharlotteNow.tv coverage of Charlotte's State of Our Environment Town Hall, hosted by Councilwoman Dimple Ajmera. Tonight we're going to be talking data centers, water, and Charlotte's future. Stick around, the presentation is just about to begin. Hey, jump in the, if you would, jump in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. And a reminder that your commentary and your questions, if appropriate, and they fit our format under 400 questions or 400 characters, your comments and questions from our Facebook feed and from our YouTube channel will be pulled up on occasion throughout the presentation up on the screen. Stick around. My name is Christopher John Scalise from Scalise Media, and CharlotteNow.tv is my channel that I've been broadcasting community affairs television for many years here since we moved here like 4 years ago now. Yeah, Charlotte's a great place, and this is a very, very important topic affecting not only Charlotte, but folks around the world. And we want to know where you're watching from, and we want to hear your thoughts. So drop them in Facebook or the YouTube live stream comments, and we will be throughout the evening pulling some of those up and bringing them up on the screen for our audience at home. All right, room is starting to fill up. I'm going to go ahead and go to the splash screen here. We'll be back in just a few minutes with the live presentation. Hello, friends. You are watching coverage of State of Our Environment, Data Centers, Water, and Charlotte's Future. Exclusively on CharlotteNow.tv. My name is Christopher John Scalise, and I am the owner and producer of Scalise Media Group. And CharlotteNow.tv is one of my pet projects. I believe in transparency and holding government accountable. And I'm also involved in the activist community and very interested in this subject and very passionate about this subject. So we're giving this stream of this public event, this city event, to you at home. First off, we need your help. Please share this stream far and wide. Let folks know where you're watching from. Put your comment in the Facebook or the YouTube thread, and we may select them to pull up on the screen during the show. and well, get involved in what we're doing. If you are so inclined, I want you to go to our Facebook group that I helped to found, Stop East Charlotte Data Center. We have grown. We started this thing back in May, and it has grown to over 300 members. You can find us on Facebook, and if you live in the East Charlotte neighborhoods that may be affected by the proposed data center, then get involved, and by all means also get involved citywide and wherever you may be in your local community. Educate yourself, speak up, and by all means, most importantly, press your public officials for transparency and to be accountable to your voice. Speaking of which, we want to hear your voice. Jump on the comment thread, ask questions, and if your question is appropriate and we have the time and the bandwidth to be able to bring it up, we'll bring it up on the screen throughout the evening. And they're waiting for the room to fill up. The presentation was supposed to start at 6 p.m. sharp, but it seems they're running a little bit behind getting people signed in and into the venue. I'll show you what's happening here. Let me go ahead and go to the broad view. See, beautiful. Project 658. Beautiful venue here in East Charlotte. So folks are coming in. They're expecting, and we're set up for 300-400 people, actually. Nice presentation tonight. And quite a bit of information we're going to be going over tonight. We're waiting on our presenter, Congresswoman Dimple Ajmera, who is going to be facilitating this conversation, bringing up the panels for discussion, and we will also be having a time of audience Q&A. So we will be able to show the people that are speaking in the audience tonight. Again, I want to stress, this is very, very important. When we do things like this, I just want you to understand that, well, I don't have a whole lot of control over audio. This is an RPA system. So what I have to do, we weren't unable to get a direct line out from the PA. So I don't know how well you're going to be able to hear. And they're only using 2 microphones. I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to hear as they're passing the microphones around, but we're going to do our best to capture room audio with my wireless microphones. We got an ETA before we begin? Do we have an? Oh, wonderful. Okay. All right. Councilwoman Ajmera is here. And let's go ahead and bring her in. Well, there she is. Okay. Councilwoman. Oh, your mother. That's awesome. I really appreciate you kidding me? I wouldn't have missed it for the world. Yeah. It looks beautiful. We are live on Facebook and YouTube. So my family's watching. You can see here. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. So you make sure you make well, there you go. Say hi. They're right there. All right. Friends and family watching. There you go. That's awesome. Looking forward to a great presentation. All right. Looks like we're about ready to go. Again, Christopher John Scalise from CharlotteNow.tv, offering you, the good people of Charlotte and the great free people of this amazing nation, this free community service, encouraging and amplifying citizen voices, encouraging and amplifying the call for transparency and government accountability across the board, but specifically on this critical issue. Tonight, the state of our environment, data centers, water, and Charlotte's future, live from beautiful Project 6 58 in East Charlotte. Looks like the presentation's going to get going here in just a minute. All right. Sorry about that. We had to move a cable. One of the quirks of working different venues. All right. It looks like we are about to begin. Let me pull up the main camera. And again, thank you for tuning in. We are looking forward to hearing and seeing your comments. Heather, how are you? Looking forward to seeing your comments in the Facebook thread and on the YouTube channel. And we can go ahead and pull them up on the screen as well. Let me see if anybody is in right now. And we'll test that out. Okay, I don't see anybody quite yet. All right, we're going to go ahead and go to our main cam. Folks, if you're watching out there on the internet, I want you to drop a comment and tell us who you are, where you're watching from. I'm going to test our system to see if indeed we're being able to pull your comment and questions into the live stream. So would you do that for me? We'd greatly appreciate that. All right, that is a comment from last night. Let's go ahead and see if we can get a fresh comment going and test that common system, make sure that it's working for you. So drop comment, tell us where you're watching from. I don't have any control over the PA. It is working. It's just very low. Yeah, you're gonna have to eat the mic and yell into it.
My 3 and 5-year-old are watching online. Uh, so I'm excited to show them, look at how many adults are in this room that truly care about the type of quality of life that we leave behind for the next generation. So our State of Environment Town Hall has become an annual event. I've been doing this for many, many years now. But this year, I wanted us to focus our conversation on one issue that I'm hearing more and more about every day, which is data centers. A few months ago, I called for a pause on new data centers because I believed we needed to understand its impact on water, on our quality of life, on our power grid, our neighborhoods, and ultimately our pocketbooks. So the pause was never the finish line. It gave us something invaluable, and that is time. And we need to use that time wisely. So tonight is part of that work. Let me be very clear. This town hall is not about pro AI or anti AI or pro growth or anti growth or pro technology or anti technology. This conversation is about how do we protect our residents, our neighborhoods, our quality of life, and our pocketbooks. So we have residents here, we have a lot of neighborhood leaders here, we have environmental advocates here, we have city staff, and we also have representatives from the industry. And let me tell you, we may not agree on everything tonight. And that's okay. My job is not to come into this room with the outcome that's already decided. Today, my job is to listen to you. So I will not be talking much. I'll be moderating the panel. I will be listening to the facts. I'll be asking tough questions, and you all will get an okay. All right. All right. So index cards will be passed around, so you can all write your questions down. And at the end, we will have 30 minutes for Q&A. We will have 4 panels. First panel is just going to be understanding data centers, just the facts. Second panel is going to be about water, energy, environmental impacts. That's when we hear from the experts. Panel 3, we are going to have neighborhood leaders, community voices. And panel 4 is going to be solutions and next steps. And at the end, we'll have Q&A. So Many of your questions might be addressed as we are going through these 4 panels, but if they do not, you will have an opportunity to ask questions. So we know that growth is coming, and really the questions that I have is about who benefits from that growth, who carries the burden, and who pays for it. So if major development requires water, more electricity, or more infrastructure, we deserve to know what that means for our residents. Those are the questions I have received so far. And I believe in a very simple principle that growth should pay its own way. So we should be able to grow our economy without asking residents to subsidize a $1 billion industry. And tonight is not just a listening exercise, but what you tell me here tonight will leave this room with me. Your concerns, your questions, and your ideas will help inform the next steps in coming months. So let's ask the tough questions. Let's listen to one another. And most importantly, let's make sure that all of your voices are heard in this discussion. So let's get started. I'm going to start with panel 1. So first panel, we have David Patton. David is with City Planning staff. He's a division manager of Entitlement Services, Planning, Design, and Development Department for the City of Charlotte. Let's give him a big hand. Second, we have Colin Brown. He's a land use attorney with the law firm Alexander Riggs. He represents property owners and developers, including data centers across the region. Well, you may not agree with him, but that's okay. We still gotta hear him out. Then we have Scott Hurst. He's a vice president with Lincoln Property Company and serves as president-elect on behalf of Commercial Real Estate Development Association, bringing extensive experience in commercial real estate. And then, last but not the least, my good friend, June Blotny. She's a former executive director at Clean Air, North Carolina. She served in that capacity for 17 years. Yes. And June continues to guide Charlotte-Mecklenburg Climate Leaders, a program that she has co-founded. And because of her efforts led to the creation of the city's Strategic Energy Action Plan, the first plan the city ever adopted. Let's give her a big hand. All right, so first panel, let's start with something very basic. We will start with David. David, if you can talk about just what zoning rules currently apply to data centers in Charlotte, and then talk about what is a moratorium and what does it allow the city to accomplish.
Thank you, Councilmember Ajmera. Thank you for hosting us this evening. So we'll start off with just that basic question of where data centers are currently allowed. So just to go back in time a little bit historically, this is not an item that popped up in the UDO that was adopted a few years ago. This is something that dates back in Charlotte to 2011 when the city first established a definition for wireless communications and data storage facilities. That was through a text amendment to what we refer to now as our legacy ordinance. That definition remains unchanged since 2011. That was carried over into incorporation and adoption into our current Unified Development Ordinance. And all of the zoning districts that primarily had that use in 2011 are those same translated districts that are now in the UDO. And those are 8 different zoning districts that we've got across the city where data centers are allowed by right. Those are 2 commercial districts, an office district, one of our research districts, which primarily encompasses a lot of the area around University City, where you have the research park. We also have our 2 industrial districts, and as well as the Uptown Core District, which is our district that is primarily within that 277 ring of Uptown. That's primarily because we did have older data centers that were serving a lot of the business functions in Uptown, and that was the use that we needed to establish back in 2011 in that district as well. So those are the basic districts that we allow it in. It's allowed by right. There are no additional prescribed conditions with that use, which means there's no additional things that need to be adhered to when somebody goes to develop one of those through that by right permitting process. So they're treated just like every other industrial use, same types of buffers, same types of screening and separation. So really nothing different or unique about that use that we have today that, again, we established back with a definition in 2011. So that's the basic principle from a zoning standpoint for that use. The moratorium question, what is it? It's, as Councilmember Ajmera had mentioned earlier, it is just a pause. It's a pause on establishing that particular use under this moratorium by right or through the rezoning process. So anything that hasn't already been, going along that process so far, once that moratorium goes into effect, those types of things that are captured in it do have a pause for a certain specified time. And that's something that the state does enable all counties and cities to do throughout North Carolina. And that's primarily put in place so you can put that pause in place so you have time to do research, time to understand impacts and pros and cons and get all the facts together so you can develop other types of solutions and other things to try and address a specific issue that moratorium is trying to address. So that's where we find ourselves today. We've got a few months left. I think the deadline is November 5th, but that's where we are, and that is what the moratorium is intended to do.
Thank you, David. So as you heard, currently data centers are allowed by right in multiple zoning districts, including Uptown Core, which means if someone wants to build a data center, obviously this is outside of the moratorium. Because we have a moratorium in place, no one can build by right, correct?
No new permits.
No new
could
permits.
be applied for at that time, yes.
So by right means no public input, no hearing, and that's why I call for a pause. David, if you can talk about, does our current zoning rules differentiate between the size of data centers, like between small versus hyperscales that we have seen?
It does not. That is one of the challenges that we've got from a definition that dates back 15 years now. It captures all sizes and scales of this use. It doesn't capture the small, parts of maybe an office building that might have a floor or two that are dedicated to servers to serve that office capacity, or let's say a hospital function. But a primary building that sole purpose is for the use and capacity of data storage, that does fall under it. So that could be anywhere from 8,000 square feet to 1 million square feet. So that's one of the things of having that definition that is a little dated, that we do find ourselves at a little bit of an inability to differentiate between those.
Yeah, so that's an important distinction, because currently all data centers are treated the same way regardless of the size. So hyperscaler, that might be 3 million square feet versus one small server room that hospital or city or our CMS might need. Okay, so Scott, and you, let's go with Scott next. I know you're in commercial industry. So if you can talk about why Charlotte, what is making our region so attractive for this data center facilities right now?
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember, for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm here on behalf of CREDA, which is the Commercial Real Estate Development Association. We specialize in education, advocacy, and research for the development community. We have a number of chapters across the state and across the nation. We're made up of design professionals, owners, developers, and a lot of resources here that can really be experts on the subject matter. And we want to collaborate. We want to be at the table with you. We want to create practical solutions, and we want to commit to transparency. To the question, so Charlotte has a lot of things going for us. The last 10 years, we've seen an unbelievable development growth wave, and there's a number of reasons for that. We've got competitive wages, we've got a lower cost of living, we've got lower rental rates, we've got a lower tax tier, and most importantly, we've got a very, very deep talent pool. All of these advantages are really what fuel the growth here for these major industries. You talk about financial services, healthcare, manufacturing, tech firms. All of these things are really going well for Charlotte right now. And so data centers, the development of data centers tends to follow that same pattern, okay? As these corporations get larger, their operations need to expand, the need for data capacity increases as well. And so, again, Charlotte, in terms of the state of North Carolina as a whole, we've got reliable power sources. We've got good access to the fiber backbone that runs up the East Coast, lower land costs, lower operating costs. So those are all things right now that make Charlotte a very attractive place for development.
So Scott, to follow up on that, are we seeing, as obviously as our region is growing, and because of the industry we are seeing, the jobs that are coming to the region, are we seeing more proposals or more interest in hyperscale type of facilities versus the smaller data centers that existed 4 years ago or 5 years ago?
I'm probably not the best expert on this, but I would say obviously there is a lot more larger hyperscale data centers coming right now. My understanding is the enterprise data centers, which are a little smaller in size, are typically what back the financial services, the healthcare, all of the convenience, online stuff that we really rely on. But yes, I think you're seeing more and more AI, more and more Meta and Google growth.
Thank you, Scott. So next, we'll go to Colin. All right, Mr. Brown. So you are an attorney. For someone sitting here tonight who has never looked at our zoning code, and I know you probably have many times, could you talk about, could data centers currently locate close to your neighborhood under our current rules?
Thank you. And as I was walking in tonight, I recognized 5 or 6 faces of the folks I've worked with over the years in zoning matters. So good to see you all. I am a lawyer for developers, so no one is ever happy to see me. But thanks for having me here tonight. So Dimple, to answer your question, yes, as you mentioned, we have several zoning districts. In our ordinance, as Dave said, has a definition for telecommunications and data storage facility. And they are all around Charlotte. Many have existed, no one has known they were there. So until I think recently, in several zonings we worked on, we brought through major rezonings that we needed to change to a district. So yes, to answer your question, there are pockets of appropriate zoning around the city where data centers could be developed by right.
Thank you. Okay, next we'll go to June. So June, you were one of the speakers at our public hearing calling for a pause, and you sent council, or you advocated for a pause along with other climate leaders in the region. Could you talk about what was happening in Charlotte that made a pause necessary?
Well, actually, I have a few slides.
Sure.
Alexis,
All right, well,
I'm the only one with slides.
June came prepared.
Okay.
Here is the panel, the 2 against 1.
Yeah, so why did the council put a pause on? And the answer is easy. The community came out in vast numbers and spoke about their concerns, and the city listened. And so these are some of the things that residents brought up, and climate leaders and physicians and other people that you'll hear from tonight. Location was a big one. The first people coming out are the ones that live near the proposed data centers. So that's a big deal. The size, I think the hyperscale size is what really got people's attention. So that was one thing. Economic concerns for sure. I mean, gas prices were going up anyway, food prices, everything's going up. And now people were worried about their electric bills. The high water and electric bills due to the needs of these larger data centers. Heat islands is another one. We're here, sitting here. in this world that is all over the world. We've got heat domes and other things. And so larger data centers do create heat islands. All of the machinery that's inside, or it's sort of like if your laptop is hot, you know how when your laptop gets hot, well, this is like times a lot more. And so those buildings are hot, they have to get rid of the heat somehow. Noise impacts, if they do have, noise impacts, because I just did a crash course on this, I'm not sure. But you can tell me if the noise impacts are from the cooling things that are inside that will cool all the air inside, and then that air goes outside and it's waste air. So that creates noise, as well as diesel generators that, depending how many they have. So, and then air pollution. Some of these places may have, 100 generators inside for emergency backup. But there's, Amazon is working on one in Richmond County that has many sources of air pollution. And they have submitted an application to the State Division of Air Quality for over 600 diesel generators. And Megan is here with Southern Environmental Law Center that can say more about that. But the air pollution from diesel generators is highly toxic, depending on what tier level they are, if they're old or if they're newer, and all the pollutants that come from that. And then, of course, the climate crisis. Greenhouse gases, a lot of air pollutants that come out are greenhouse gases. And we have a strategic energy action plan, as you mentioned, and we have to make sure that our economic development aligns with our climate goals.
Thank you. It's a very comprehensive report. So the last question is for everyone, or if you want to answer, you don't have to. If you can talk about if there is anything that residents do not know about data centers that they should know.
There's a lot that I don't know about data centers, and I've been learning as we go. I do think it's important, as you said, to talk for us to all learn about the different types of data centers. I do think, and I spoke at the public hearing too, and I think it's pretty soundly viewed by the crowd, but I do think, and I hope there's some acknowledgement that I think data support is becoming critical infrastructure. Now, does that mean I think we need super AI? I don't know. But I know that when I go to my doctor's office now, they are very heavily reliant on technology. And we're hearing from our healthcare providers that they need somewhere to store that. So I think it is something that is going to be necessary. In the first rezoning, that we did for a hyperscale data center in Charlotte, we had questions. Well, it's so noisy, and how loud. And I didn't know because I'd never seen a data center. I've never been around one. We rented a Sprinter, we loaded folks up, and we went out to see it. So people can see things. So I think there's got to be education for us all. And I had a planning commissioner reach out and say, hey, if this is coming from the planning board, I think we need to go see these things and understand, because when someone tells, I don't know what a megawatt is, right? I don't know what a decibel level is. I mean, some things you just got to see to understand. And I know that all of us can't do that, but I think there's a lot that we don't know. There's a lot that I don't know. We've got to get ourselves educated on it. I think it's impossible to say, no, we can't have any more of these anywhere ever. I think they're going to come. At the public hearing, generally, most of the speakers that spoke, I agree with. I mean, I don't want my air poisoned or my water poisoned. No, I want to have technology to support a good and healthy lifestyle. And I also want to have a clean environment. So I think these are fine conversations. I'm glad we're having.
Yes, and thank you, Colleen. I remember having a conversation with you as we were working on the pause, and I had mentioned all the concerns, and in fact, you said, yes, you are in support for a pause, because as a resident of our city of Charlotte, you understand that we need to do our homework. So I appreciate that you supported a pause as well. And both, actually Scott and Colleen, both of them are residents of the city of Charlotte. So with that, I know we talked a lot about, I know June mentioned noise, water, electricity bill. The next panel is going to be specifically on our water, electricity bill, electricity grid, and our environmental impact. So with that, now that we understand where these facilities can go and what we can regulate currently, what is being regulated, our next question is, what does this mean for our resources? So with that, let's invite our second panel.
Dimple, can I say one more thing?
Yes,
People
ma'am.
are probably wondering what this is. Does anybody in the room know? Okay, go for it. Yeah, this is called a purple air monitor, and it measures PM 2.5. So if you don't know what PM 2.5 is, PM is particulate matter, and 2.5 is how big it is. Well, it's invisible. You can't see it, but you can monitor it on your house. If you live at the corner of Queens and Providence, as somebody here told me, you can measure the amount of particle pollution that you're exposed to. Anyway, purple air.
Oh, thank you, June.
Yeah. We get closer to the microphone,
Yeah.
right into it.
Okay.
Right up again.
Let's give a big hand to June and all the panelists. All right, now we have second panel that's going to be talking about our resources. If we can sit in that order, so Angela, Brandon, Kibri, and Heather then. Okay. All right. So first we have Angela Charles. Miss Charles, you go all the way. Okay. Ms. Charles is Director of Charlotte Water, the water and wastewater provider of our region. Second, we have Brandon Jones. Brandon, you want to swap with Kimberly? Yeah. Brandon Jones. Brandon is the lead scientist and advocate at Catawba Riverkeeper, a nonprofit focused on protecting the area's water resources. Let's give him a big hand. Then we have Kibri Everett. Kibri is an environmental scientist, the owner of Key Environmental Consulting, and researcher whose work examines the environmental justice, infrastructure, and community impacts of data center development. Let's welcome Kibri. And last but not the least, we have Heather Pollack. Heather is the Chief Sustainability and Resilience Officer for the City of Charlotte and leads the implementation of the unanimously council-adopted Strategic Energy Action Plan. Let's give her a big welcome. So for the second panel, we will start with Ms. Charles about water. Let's start with water. Ms. Charles, if you can talk about how much water can a large data center actually use, and put that in terms that people can understand. Right? Are we talking about equal to hundreds of homes, thousands of homes?
Yes, so, you know, a hyperscale data center can use, hundreds of gallons of water, a day. It's kind of hard to equate. I've seen one statistic that said it could be the equivalent of 4,000 homes a day, but it really varies data center to data center. And a lot of it has to do with the type of cooling that the data center actually has. So, you know, there are some data centers that may use 36,000 gallons of water a day. We've got some medical facilities that use 173,000 gallons of water a day. We have bottlers in our community that use hundreds of thousands of gallons a day because, you know, they resell this precious resource we have and put it in a plastic bottle and, you know, sell it for a little bit more. So it is really going to vary on the type of data center, especially the hyperscalers. And it's going to depend on the type of cooling that is used. And I'm talking about drinking water at this point. You want me to keep talking or you want to ask me another
Yes,
question?
please.
Okay. And so, you know, one thing that we have been looking at in our community, because this has been such an issue, is there a way that data centers can use some of the other water products that we have besides drinking water? So, for example, and when I say water products, we have well, I don't want to encourage people to drink, but we have something called Renew Brew. And Renew Brew is a beer that's made out of recycled wastewater, right? And so my thinking is that if Charlotte Water can treat wastewater to such a standard that you can ingest it, certainly you can use it for a data center. So the data center in the university area is now working with us on using reclaimed water from our wastewater treatment plant. And so what, you know, Charlotte Water is all about the best and most best efficient use of water resources for our community. And there are ways that we can support whatever is approved, because Charlotte Water is a provider, ways to support other than drinking water. So we're looking at technologies, and I'm going to just name them other water products that we can use.
So you talked about the type and the cooling system that they use. The usage depends on that. So I know that we have been dealing with water restrictions recently. Is it reasonable for residents to ask whether we have enough capacity for this kind of growth that we are seeing, Ms. Charles?
Absolutely. I think, and I think that's a reasonable question. You know, we are very, very fortunate. And there is a chart, I guess she's not gonna pull it up. I have a slide that, you know, our water comes from the Catawba River, and I know Brandon is gonna have a lot to say, you know, about that. We do a lot of high-level modeling to ensure that we have the proper capacity to support people in our community. And so a large hyperscale facility, a high water use facility goes through an evaluation. We're going to call it capacity assurance. We have to make sure from a regulatory standpoint that we have the proper capacity to serve the people in our region. And so this is what I say to folks. If you want to know how good we are at this, just look around. You know, Charlotte Water supports a community that's growing at 154 people a day, and over 1.2 million people wash, brush, and flush every day without even thinking about it. And so the way that happens is good planning and good modeling of our water resources. And so a large I'm going to call it high use facility, goes through that evaluation so that we can ensure that not just that facility, but the people that we have are served. And so we won't sacrifice. And from a regulatory standpoint, we can't because we have an obligation to serve the people who are tapped on to our distribution and collection systems. I know that's a long answer, but want to get that out there.
No,
Yeah.
this is useful. So this is the slide you were looking for?
Absolutely. And so this slide here, if you look to your far left, my right, that really represents the Catawba River and where we actually draw from. There are two, Mountain Island Lake and Lake Norman, that serve as our water sources. And again, what this chart shows you is that Charlotte Water is not just the city of Charlotte. We are a regional utility. We serve all of the towns that are represented, and then those arrows represent the wholesale connections that we have to other counties and jurisdictions. So we serve around 13 to 14 jurisdictions in our region.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Charles. Next, we'll go to Brandon. Brandon, what concerns you most about the impact on Catawba River, and what happens if we don't get this right?
Sure. Thank you for having us putting this together. I mean, I think the first challenge here is we don't know. I think the lack of transparency, the lack of good information leads to events like this, where people are very strong opinions with very little public information given. And so that's the first problem that has to be solved. When people ask, what is the impact of a data center? First, they're all different. They're all snowflakes. Some data centers might use to potentially zero water and be 100% air cooled. That's going to have a major impact on air quality, electricity, et cetera. But other ones can use tremendous amounts of water. I mean, if we look at a facility using 500 megawatts, even if it was 100% air cooled, which is very unlikely, just 500 megawatts being pulled from Duke's Catawba Eco Station, that's about 5 million gallons per day, which is roughly 2% or so of total withdrawals throughout the entire system. So we can model that. We have amazing modeling that RTI and the Catawba Water Management Group have been doing for the last 5 years. There's a wonderful acronym, the Catawba Water Management Group's Integrated Water Resources Plan. Really rolls off the tongue, hot off the press. I'm sure everybody's read through the 400 pages like I have. It's wonderful. But it is a great plan, but it does not include data centers. That plan explicitly was put together projecting, power usage, water usage, growth, climate change, high demand, low demand, El Niños, things like that. Data centers are not in that model. And so it is very important that we have a new type of industry come in, whatever that may be, that they are then paying for that modeling to be done, so that we can show that, okay, we can prove conclusively using this amazing modeling that we've all contributed to show what those effects are. And if there are effects, then those need to be mitigated. And there are a lot of different ways that can be done. But first, we have to know what the actual effects are. And so that is my biggest concern. It's just the lack of reliable information that we have about these facilities. And we've already permitted 3 in the area, just right here around Charlotte. Not to mention all that's happening around the Google facility in Lenore, and Microsoft facilities upstream of us. And so this is not just a Charlotte problem. This is not just a Piedmont problem. This is a national problem. We need better information so that communities can make good decisions, so that policymakers can make good policies. But without that, then we're all just kind of yelling at each other.
Well, thank you for bringing that up in terms of transparency. And transparency helps build trust with the community. So what would it take for Charlotte Water to get the level of data that you need to build the modeling?
Yes, so part of it is when someone taps onto our system, a capacity analysis is done. In other words, they have to reveal to us how much water that they would, need to be provided with, especially that, it's metered. And so we know that meters have a certain tolerance range. The efficiency of a water meter is based on the amount of water you can put through it. And so there's some analytical work that is done to verify that the meter is appropriate, and therefore that translates to the gallons of water that a particular facility would be using. And so the only way that we can figure out whether we can support it is to have that information shared with us. And I understand perfectly what Brandon is saying, because it kind of seems like it's kind of a secret a little bit in the beginning when a data center is looking at a community. The other thing I want to hit is that we do believe that development should pay for growth. And so when and the analysis is done and there are infrastructure improvements, then we expect that developer, aka data center owner, whomever, to pay for those improvements to the system. And the additional operational costs are also included in the rate. And when I say rate, everybody has a water bill, right? You pay so much per unit. A data center would not be paying the same per unit because we are cost of service, and we don't expect for our residents to supplement data centers or any high use users, because we have some high use companies in our service area too.
So residents do not subsidize, when it comes to water, do not subsidize any industrial uses, whether that's data centers or other usage.
Absolutely. So the example that I talked about using reclaimed water, that's water that we treated to a certain standard. You can't drink it, but you can use it on your lawn. It's the water that's used for irrigation down in Florida. It comes from a wastewater treatment plant. We said, hey, we want you to use this product and also pay for the water lines, the reclaimed water lines, and improvements to the plant. We think that's the fairest way to do it, so that we, and I'm a Charlotte Water customer, we aren't supplementing.
Thank you, Ms. Strong. And you talked about the metering, and how that will help with data and transparency, and ultimately will help us build the models. To Brandon's point, is that something currently being asked of the data centers, or is that something that we cannot ask?
Well, we have to connect onto our system. We have to get that data. So the ones that are in process, we're working with them to get that data. It's a lot of engineering analysis for the current small data centers that we have in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. We already have that information because we know how much water they're using. So, the way you get your water bill is we know how much water you're using. So it's the same concept with industrial and commercial facilities.
So we would not know currently how much water hyperscalers that we have in the city of Charlotte uses, because there are two under construction, one in the university, one off of Moore's Chapel.
Yeah, but there is a projection,
Okay.
because that's the only way we can figure out whether we can serve is to have a projection.
And can you tell us a little bit about what that projection looks like?
Well, I think, let me look here. I think I do have that.
So while you're looking, let's go with Kibbery here. As someone who works in environmental justice space, what questions should Charlotte be asking right now that we are not asking?
Great question. And I actually have slides that can speak to this, Alexis, if you don't mind. Okay. So this first slide, so I created this map because I wanted us to be able to visually see where the existing data centers are located. And they are shown there with the green dots, and the locations are approximate, but they did come from a City of Charlotte map. And then, as the councilwoman just mentioned, we have over in the west side, Morris Chapel, and then the powerhouse over in the east side. And so when we think about, in terms of environmental justice, we want to think about what burdens already exist for residents and for our communities. And so on this map, I've added just one variable, and that variable shown by the red dots or orange dots are EPA toxic release inventory sites. And so those sites that are shown there with those circles are locations or facilities that are emitting air pollution, so heavy metals and other chemical contaminants into the atmosphere. And so we do use GIS and create maps and do these kinds of analysis to understand what are the burdens and what are the impacts going to be for residents when we add a digital infrastructure such as a data center. And so, Alexis, if you go to the next slide to answer your question specifically, what should residents be asking? We've outlined a few of these things here, and I've been working with Action NC, Robert Dawkins, who you'll hear from momentarily, on adjustments or recommendations that communities should be recommending for ordinance changes. So the first thing is noise. And so as June mentioned earlier, these data centers are generally operating, multiple hours of the day. So we want to start with analyzing the noise, a 24-hour baseline and modeled noise amount or measurement to see, what the noise impacts are. And we know that noise can affect mental health, it can affect wildlife. So there are a lot of environmental impacts. The next thing is whether these facilities are going to be using backup generators on site. And those generators are emitting carbon, which is contradictory and doesn't help us meet the strategic energy action plan that the city has. So we need to measure the number and the amount of emissions coming from any on-site generators, in addition to other air pollution, other air contaminants. And then when we think about the construction of these facilities, we have to ask, how much impervious surface is being added? We know the hyperscale data centers are very large, hundreds of thousands of square feet. So what is the impact into the water? The Morris Chapel site, for example, is, I think, less than a mile, less than half a mile from the Catawba River itself. And so what are the impacts on the Catawba River from that particular site during construction, especially? In addition to during the construction of these data centers, we also have to think about the trees that are being removed for these sites. And so we know that on the west side of Charlotte, there's less tree canopy and more extreme heat on that side of town. And so having a data center over there might be something we want to factor in, what is going to be the impact on tree canopy, on the streams, and on, an increase in heat. And then when we think about from a community standpoint, an environmental justice standpoint, we want to make sure that the same communities are not experiencing the burdens that come along with this kind of infrastructure. So we need to look at historic environmental injustices as well as economic injustices that might exist, that result from an increase in energy bills or an increase in, health outcomes, adverse health outcomes as a result of increased air pollution, especially if there's on-site on-site generation of electricity. And then we combine all that. So as an environmental scientist, and especially one who analyzes cumulative impacts, we look at all those different variables, all those domains, and we can do a calculation to determine the degree to which residents are at risk for being additionally burdened against these facilities. And then last but not least, we want to make sure that we continuously monitor the impacts that these data centers pose on our electricity, on our economic opportunity, economic development, and the natural environment. So, long answer.
Thank you. Thank you for that comprehensive presentation and the impacts. So, Ms. Charles, are you ready to talk about the projections?
Yes, I only have one that has come in, and it's at 35,000 gallons per day, which is not really hyperscale level. It's about the size of when in terms of usage of maybe a food processing plant. So it's like a level down.
And that's the one in university or
That's the Morris Chapel.
Morris Chapel?
Yeah. Now I do have to be kind of careful with this information. So this is an estimate.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Charles. Next, we will go to Heather. So we did invite Duke Energy at the table, but we weren't able to get anyone from Duke Energy to be here. So Heather, maybe Um, Heather, I often get questions about electricity, and I know we have reached out to Duke Energy at multiple occasions. And the question I hear from residents is pretty simple. Are residents subsidizing data centers, especially when it comes to utility bills? And then I will give you an easy one at the end about CEAP and its impact on CEAP, Strategic Energy Action Plan.
So we are over time, so I'll try to be brief. But that may sound like a simple question, but it's much more complex. I will say that at the Utilities Commission, North Carolina Utilities Commission, who they regulate Duke Energy and Dominion Energy in North Carolina, they Duke Energy has brought a new large load tariff to the commission, and that what that means is basically sort of a rate class, if you will, on how much large energy users are going to pay. And so in that tariff, it basically talks about how large users, which I believe it's over 100 megawatts, which those large users would then have to go through a system impact study, which all large interconnections do, even solar farms. So like our 80 megawatt solar farm that we're working to put online to help our CEAP goals has to be interconnected. And during that time, they have to then pay a fee for them to be studied to make sure that they are able to interconnect to the grid, and that they pay just like Charlotte Water for their upgrades. However, supply and demand, right? If the more people that, the more that power is used, then prices will eventually go up. That's just a fact. So I don't think you can point to data centers and say that they are necessarily the only reason for any increase in price. But the more that you use, the higher eventually the price is going to be, because there's going to be so much demand for that use.
So to follow up on that, that depends on the type of facility, how much electricity that they use, and if they use more, ultimately everyone pays more. Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm not going to say that.
Okay. Well, I think that's the answer that I think we should demand from Duke Energy. But if you can talk about, Heather, just the impact on our Strategic Energy Action Plan.
Yeah, so this is, my heart work for anyone that knows me. And I think that obviously our concern is that with greater energy use, typically you have more carbon emissions. However, I think that, there's an opportunity here as well, because there are data center companies that are doing it right. And they have climate goals just like we do, and they are finding ways to invest in renewable energy and pushing their utilities in their service areas to offer more renewable energy resources to them to use. And so obviously more power use means more carbon emissions right now. But if Duke Energy meets their 2050 goals, we will all meet. We, the city of Charlotte, will also meet our CEAP goals.
Right. So a lot depends on Duke Energy and their source of the energy. So we will continue to ask questions when it comes to our impact on the utility bills to Duke Energy. But I know, Heather, can you talk about the state and what the state is doing, our legislatures, in terms of the ratepayers' protections?
Yes, so city staff have identified about 9 bills that have been put forth in the state legislature to regulate data centers. There is one bill that has made it the farthest. They're all bill 730. But that none of them we don't have any information as to when the legislature, would potentially take that up. It's dead. Okay, according to Mr. Dawkins, it's dead. So there's a lot of concern around the state, and so the things that we can do are what we're doing with the moratorium. We're pausing and trying to evaluate how we can make sure that we can grow together.
Oh, thank you, Heather. Let's give her a big hand in the entire panel. So as you can tell, there are a number of questions that we do not have an answer to, such as electricity, the impact on our utility bills, the capacity. Heather and her team is working to get some of these answers while working with our state legislatures. And that's why we needed a pause, because there's a lot that we do not know. So with that, let's bring our third panel. So panel 3. First, we'll start with Tony Mingo. Tony has lived in Charlotte for 21 years and is a community activist and a volunteer advocate for residents in long-term care facilities, and is also a good friend of mine. Let's welcome Tony. Second, we have Gustavo Toro. He's my neighbor. A local parent of a child with autism who wants the future as well as the quality of life for his son to be set up for success. Thank you, Gustavo, for advocating for our children. Next, we have Juliana Mister. Juliana is a community advocate and co-founder of Stop East Charlotte Data Center Group. And last but not the least, we have Dr. Ariel White. Dr. White is a retired family physician, neuroscientist, and mother who lives walking distance from the largest hyperscale data center in University City. So we heard about the numbers, we heard about the impact, and I want to talk about now what this looks like when you are the person living next door. So Tony, we will start with you. When you hear that a data center is being built near your neighborhood, what are you most worried about?
There are so many things that I'm worried about.
Yes, let's hear it.
But I will say first that not one person on any panel wants to live near a hyperscale data center. Not one. And that living near one will probably affect our property values, because nobody will buy our homes if we try to sell. So I have to say something about generational wealth. We talk about it all the time, but every time an African American or a brown person moves forward, we are moved backwards economically. We do not catch up. And hyperscales will cause us to lose property values. So, moving right along. I also live near the 2.5 square million feet data center on University City Boulevard. It is unregulated. We're not included in the moratorium. And so the protections that Councilmember Ajmera mentioned do not include us. And every resident in the Charlotte, Mecklenburg area should be protected. And that includes me, that includes all of you. So.
This is your time, Miss Mingo.
Well,
I want to hear. I mean,
I'm also concerned about pollutants because there, as was said in the minutes of the meeting where this hyperscale was discussed, and where's Colin Brown, who was there at that meeting? Well, nobody knew then what a hyperscale was. Basically, Colin said that was the first one he'd ever dealt with and represented. So that hyperscale was approved without any knowledge. And that is a shame, and that is the reason why we will not be protected by the moratorium or anything that comes out of the moratorium. So that's just a couple reasons why I'm against it.
Thank you, Miss Mingo. Let's give her a big hand. She's a passionate advocate for our community, and I've always appreciated her passion, even times when she calls me on weekends and late at night. I love you, Miss Mingo. Next, we will go to my neighbor, Gustavo. Gustavo, I know that environmental justice word gets used a lot. What does it actually mean in this conversation? Are there communities that could end up carrying more of the impact than others? If you can also talk a little bit about how you got started with your advocacy about the data center that was being proposed in near our neighborhood.
Thank you, Councilman Ajmera. Thank you. Well, there's a park nearby that I go every other day with my son. We go hiking. Reedy Creek Park, beautiful place. Not just a park, but it's also a nature preserve. And I found out about this through PSL. They've made a post online about how they're building a data center just down the road from where I live, less than a mile from a nature preserve. And understanding and learning how much damage it does to its surroundings, such as the overwhelming amount of water consumption, as well as air pollution. And this one in particular bothers me too, because it would bother my son who has autism, and it's with the noise. See, my son is very, very sensitive to things like that. He would be very sensitive to even a sound of a bad AC or bad brakes on a school bus, and it torments him. Hearing such a child cry in pain over sound, they're sensitive about those things because their senses work very different than a regular, well, I guess an average person per se, right? Because being a parent from a child of in the spectrum, you get to learn that there are different levels of the spectrum, right? Now, my son is verbal, and I try to emphasize so much of communication, and as I can't be any prouder because it helped him so much. He grew so much just with communication, and understanding that. And I try as best, I still am, I'm trying best as possible to make sure that he is, that he can have with care such treatment, to be very cautious of even the tone of my voice with my son, because even with if you were to speak too loud, too heavy, um, that would that would impact him so much negatively. And these data centers and a lot of, well, what I hear a lot of, not benefits at all. I hear a lot more of misbenefits and a lot more dooming things of their existence than benefits, honestly. Even with the panels that have already spoken, I haven't necessarily heard much of the benefits of them being in place. And with that being said, it will harm my son, not just through the noise, but the air pollution as well as the water consumption. And I heard, I hear key words such as the community needing to contribute more for it. Uh, another, this one's my personal favorite that I hear from businessmen. They say this particular word, pockets. They love saying pockets. I keep hearing pockets, and I think that's probably a key word that's pretty direct about our expenses, our pockets. And I think we're also missing the simple thing, and that's our future, our children. I'm here today to advocate for my son, my future, as well as everybody else's future, everybody else's children, because they are our future. And um, I I asked this question to challenge not just the developers, but those companies that I'm sure you don't want data centers on your backyards either. That if you want a future, how will you want a future to thrive when you're going to poison them? How exactly is that going to work? How is that going to work well? Uh, yeah, that's my answer to the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Gustavo. I appreciate your advocacy for our neighborhood and advocating for our children. My 3 and 5 year old are watching, and they're proud to see someone is fighting for them.
Thank you.
Next, we will go to Juliana. Could you talk about our current process since we adopted a 150-day pause? And what do you think about our current process so far to gather public feedback?
Well, I think throughout this whole process, like even before the moratorium, um, one of my greatest concerns, I think a lot of people's concern has been about transparency. Um, when I first moved back to Charlotte from Boone after I graduated, I have been hearing about data centers being developed, and especially the one in Utah, and how the major lake has been drying up over the decade, and the data center has been helping. And then my sister came to me, and that's when I began to learn about the data center being built a few minutes away from my house, and also very close to a nature preserve. And so I just feel that the community hasn't really been given a lot of information about these data centers being built, and also with the moratorium update, um, especially with the information, um, especially with gathering information during the first 75 days. Um, when we email our council members, um, we get a lot of redirecting and being told to email someone else. And so it just kind of feels like we're going in circles and not really getting a lot of answers. And like another example, my sister, she was on this task force a few back, and it would be canceled, and she was not alerted that it was canceled, and had to basically find out like through the news and whatnot. And so I feel like there's a lot of lack of transparency, and then especially with the fact that we don't really know like what kind of effects these data centers will have on our communities like that. Like there's a lot of questions surrounding these data centers, and the fact that past data centers have already been approved, and future data centers are being proposed in places that are very sensitive, like right next to 3 neighborhoods in close to a nature preserve. It's just a lot of confusion and not a lot of answers.
Well, Juliana, thank you for being candid. When it comes to lack of transparency, I share those concerns, and I do know we have city staff here. They're taking notes, and we want to make sure that some of this that I'm hearing, I take it back with me. I also have my colleague here with me, Councilmember Victoria Watlington, and former Councilmember Marjorie Molina is also here. Next, we'll go to Dr. White. Dr. White, can you please talk about what are you thinking about data centers from a public health standpoint?
Sure, thank you. So I'm looking at basically all of the downstream effects of having polluted air, polluted water, things like that. So I actually did bring slides, but they didn't make I think the final cut to be presented. So I do have some statistics, so I'm sorry if it's a little bit heady. But basically, those living near data centers, according to a report by the World Health Organization, are at a 119% higher risk of having mental health problems. The constant noise and light pollution, which is typically around 24/7, causes sleep disturbance, stress, high blood pressure, heart disease, and the light in particular that causes even higher rates of hormonal cancers like breast and prostate. Then we move on to the air pollution. This is from the Harvard School of Public Health. Air pollution could contribute to 1,300 premature deaths and 600,000 new cases of asthma per year by 2030. And that accumulates to a healthcare burden of over $20 billion. So these data centers are not harmless. They also show that fine particulate matter, which June had the little device for, 2.5, even for a few hours of exposure or a few days, could be responsible for 1 million premature deaths per year. So these are not like noxious things that we're talking about. The fact that I live walking distance from one almost guarantees, the hyperscale one no less, almost guarantees that we'll be taking a 6-figure loss on our house, and I'm okay with that for the extension of our lifespans. And so based on the PM 2.5, I used some more data from the Environmental Protection Agency. So I broke it down, they broke it down by emergency room visits for asthma in children. When the PM 2.5 is at 100 micrograms per cubic meter, which is what data centers can very easily reach, asthma, the risk of being admitted with asthma increases by 42.4%. Stroke mortality increases, your risk increases by 270%, so you're 3.7 times more likely to die. And then cardiovascular disease mortality is up 341%, so you're 4.4 times more likely to die when you're exposed to that level of the PM 2.5. So just a few fun facts, but looking at specific data centers like the Amazon one in Oregon, they reported nitrates in the drinking water and they got caught, so they just settled out of court for $20 million, but they were seeing rare cancers and miscarriages all over locally, and so that's what happened there. You look at the metadata center in Wyoming, there's a rare drug-resistant bacteria found in heavy metal contaminated wastewater of the citizens. So that's another one that will surely be in litigation. My husband's also an attorney, so you get a little 2-for-1 with me. And then the facility right up the road in Lenoir, I believe it's Google, has a regulatory limit. Like, first of all, there's a lot of whistleblowers saying that none of these limits are being adhered to anyway. They're just flushing toxic chemicals, for fun almost, it seems. There's just complete disregard for human health and the environment. And so their regulatory limit for nitric oxide is 250 tons a year. And the permit review showed that they were emitting over 10 times that legal limit. So not only are there very few regulations to begin with, but where they are, we're not adhering to them. So you can really see the reason that I believe that extending this moratorium is something that we need to be talking about right now. We're already halfway through. And this is our first real public town hall discourse on the topic. So Brandon mentioned the Catawba Riverkeeper that there's a 400-page document that needs to be updated and modeled. And do you think it could be done in 2 months? I don't know. I personally would not want to take that on. So I think extending is a great idea. I think Heather was asked about consumers paying a higher price. There was a study across 7 different states, including Virginia, our neighbor to the north. And consumers did pay $4.3 billion for grid expansion. And what happens when you do that is the grid then becomes less reliable as well. And so during times of extreme temperatures, heat or cold, people are dying. They're unable to keep their houses cold or warm to regulate their body temperature. This puts people at risk like my babies and at the elderly, pregnant women, which I am currently as well. And so basically, I asked Duke, what happens if there's an extreme temperature? I mean, it's actually happened when I gave birth. It was Christmas Day, and Duke preferentially shut off power to part of the city just so that they could make sure that they could meet demand. There wasn't even an actual outage. They just wanted to make sure that they had, the right people covered. I wasn't one of them. Wasn't lucky enough, I guess, with my newborn baby at home. But anyway, so when I asked Duke, who's going to be preferentially covered? Do you have any kind of agreements? I was given the response of, we have an NDA. So I'm curious how many of these NDAs are floating around here. And the bottom line is we do need more transparency and we do need more time to explore really the finer details of this. But yes, there's impactful human health findings. They're really alarming to me as a doctor, as a mother, and as a community member who, as I said, is going to unfortunately probably have to move.
Thank you, Dr. White. Let's give them a big hand. So you heard about the health impacts, noise, quality of life impacts. And let me tell you, I am taking these concerns very seriously. And that's why I called for a pause. I'm not married to a specific timeline. What I'm married to is that we get this right. This is going to be a consequential decision, a policy that we will shape over coming months. And I'm committed to you all to ensure that we get this right together. So let's give one big round of applause for panel 2. Next, we will hear from panel 4. Panel 4.
But remember, the university area is not included in that moratorium. We need
You're going to hear from the attorney, city attorney, Numbler. So next, we will have. Okay, so panel 4. First, we have. All right, got it. Terry Hagler-Gray. Terry is our assistant city attorney supervisor for the city of Charlotte, and she helped us with implementing a pause for 150 days. Let's give her a big hand. Second, we have Robert Dawkins. You probably all know Robert. He's the political director of Action NC. and he has organized in this community for over 20 years on issues impacting low to moderate income neighborhoods. And he's a good friend. Next, we have Megan Kimball. Megan is a senior attorney at the Southern Environmental Law Center. Where she focuses on land use and transportation policy and is working with her colleagues in communities across our state and region to make sure data centers are built in the right places with the right protections. Last but not the least, we have Kevin McNulty. Kevin is the Director of Public Affairs for Digital Realty, the world's largest data center platform, connecting companies, technologies, and data across a global network of digital infrastructure. Digital Realty has been operating in Charlotte for more than 2 decades and continues to invest in the region's growth and innovation. And he flew in here just for this town hall. Thank you. And he's got 2 little ones. 3 little ones. All right. Okay, so let's start with solutions, and I want to talk about what we can actually do about all the concerns that's been raised so far. So we'll start with Turi. Of everything we've discussed tonight, what can Charlotte realistically put into an ordinance? What are the next steps? And what decisions will council ultimately need to make?
Thank you, Councilmember Ajmera. As you heard, we are halfway through this 150-day moratorium. And the moratorium period was basically for us to collect community feedback, hear from subject matter experts. So I do really appreciate, all the information that we've heard today, and study and gather information about the actual impacts of data centers. And it's so funny because some people say data, some people say data, so I'll probably do it differently during the the presentation. It just depends, but it's a very complex issue, rapidly changing, and so we are listening intently to all of you who have so much passionate feedback about it. But with respect to the city's authority, I think I just want to level set that a bit, because what we hear about the main concerns are water and energy, noise, air pollution, those sort of things. And so I think what we need to remember is that the city is a creature of the state. And so the city gets its authority from the state of North Carolina. And so the general statutes govern what we can do. And some of the issues that you're hearing about, water, we do have a great water department. You've heard a lot of information about what they're doing to protect our water system. And they get their, I'm not the water attorney, so don't let me get it wrong, Angela, but mainly from the state. The energy, you've heard about Duke Energy. We have no control over Duke Energy at the city. And also the Environmental Protection Act. I'm looking at Heather. The federal and state governments are kind of what give the city its authority. And then lastly, planning. You heard from Dave Pettin in the first panel, and local zoning authority, which is what I do, is really important. And where these things are located is within the authority of the city, because right now we have this definition for data centers and they are allowed to be by right in 8 districts. The reason that that's important is because our moratorium is a little bit different from some of the other cities in the state. the cities and counties, because a lot of counties and cities don't have a definition for data centers. And so what they're doing during their moratoria periods are creating definitions. We don't necessarily need to do that. And the reason it's an issue for us, I will say, is because in 2024, the state passed a bill, Senate Bill 382. Can't remember the session law right now, but it amended the state general statutes and said that cities cannot downzone properties without the written consent of all the property owners. And so technically it means that it's very difficult for cities to amend their zoning ordinances right now. And so it's very difficult with that downzoning law in place for there to be a change in where data centers are located. And Mr. Dawkins, I heard him, he understands that, the state has not taken up these bills. It had a bill that was pending about changing that downzoning law, but it's dead. And the bill with respect to addressing data centers from the state level, which would be useful to us, which is Senate Bill 730, I didn't know that was dead, but.
Well, one thing we come back for now is to overturn the governor's veto.
Okay.
You get new legislature changes.
So we're subject to state regulation, but we entered into the moratorium and we listened to the feedback at the public hearing, and the council members listened to the feedback, and they unanimously approved the moratorium because they wanted to try to figure out what we could do. So I wanted to start with the things that we're limited in doing, but we are exploring what we can do in the permitting process with these by right developments with respect to ensuring that they are adhering to water standards and energy standards and noise standards. And we do have a noise ordinance that we're reviewing right now. And so we may have an opportunity to amend the noise ordinance. And, just trying to be as flexible as we can within the city's authority, using all the feedback, because what I will say is that what we're doing tonight is so important to get this community feedback and to get the subject matter feedback, because since we do have a definition right now, unlike a lot of other smaller towns, if we make any changes, we've got to have really good factual evidence and data to support whatever we're doing. So.
Okay. Thank you, Tori. So this is what our staff is helping us with, is to make sure we have data to support every concern, every issue. Because you heard from our city attorney's office, the city has limited authority, but we are doing everything that we can to protect our residents and our neighborhoods. So next, we'll go to Robert Dawkins. Mr. Dawkins, what protections do you think are missing from this conversation?
So we got to start the conversation out with the state of North Carolina doesn't give us any protections. They give us orders. So every time I walk in a room with anybody from the city, I hear what we can't do. I never hear what we can do. The power in this state should derive from the people and not from the General Assembly telling us what we can't do. So first, we need to start there. But there are a few things we need to do. Everything that I've heard from every panel here today says that the first thing we need to do is to outlaw hyperscale facilities in our city. There's no need for hyperscale facilities. We should start there. But when we move from there, there's a few things we need to work on. We need to go back and look at the UDO, and we need to look at where data centers are permitted, because they've been permitted too many places. If they weren't permitted to be near Miss Mingo's house, then Miss Mingo wouldn't be fighting for it right now. But so we need to go back and look. There's too many areas that data centers are allowed in. So the first thing we got to look at is that, because I can tell you right now, it is easier to get a data center in West Charlotte than it is to get a rental center in South Charlotte. And that right there is not fair. And that's where you're going to find all your data centers, West Charlotte, East Charlotte, not South Charlotte. So if we get rid of hyperscales, we're gonna have to spread them out. We're gonna have to go to edge, or we're gonna have to go to smaller ones. So everybody has to have a piece in this fight. So first thing we gotta do is gotta get rid of hyperscale facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Dawkins. I know you have sent us a white paper with all the protections, and that's something we are exploring with the attorney's office and our planning staff. And next, we'll go to Megan. Megan helps many cities, municipalities across the state with her work at Southern Environmental Law Center. Megan, could you talk about what are other communities doing that Charlotte should be looking at?
That's a great question, Councilmember Ajmera, and thank you so much for having me here tonight. It's interesting because in North Carolina, Charlotte is in just about the same position as every other community that has now adopted a moratorium. We are still very early in regulating data centers anywhere in our state. So we really have to look outside our state to see what people are doing who have had more experience with this. And one place to look at is Loudoun County, Virginia, which is the data center capital of the world. They put out this great 15 best practices, which I really recommend everyone take a look at. You can find it online. And it goes through category by category what sorts of protections Loudoun County would recommend every community adopt. And so Robert's People's Ordinance incorporates a lot of those very important protections that are based on other communities' experiences with this. But there are a couple of things that I would like to highlight. And the first being that it's so important to have strong local protections because as Robert mentioned, we can't wait for the state or the federal government to put those in place. The most direct way you can protect yourself is by having a strong ordinance, and Charlotte is taking a lot of great steps in that direction. With the work that you're doing now, the main a big top line recommendation from Loudoun County is to never allow data centers by right. I would say that I have a bit of a different perspective on downzoning than the assistant city attorney. Of course, I'm a bit of an armchair expert. I'm not the city attorney. I don't represent Charlotte, so it's easy for me to sit in my seat and have a bit more of a broader interpretation of downzoning. But my perspective is that hyperscale data centers are a new use. They were not contemplated when Charlotte defined data centers back in 2011. And David spoke to that in the first panel. You know, at the time, there weren't many data centers this size, and they certainly weren't in Charlotte, in North Carolina. This has been a relatively new thing that people have become aware of and started studying. So I think that it would be reasonable for Charlotte to say hyperscale data centers are completely different from what we have in our ordinance that we've defined and regulated. And so for that reason, we're allowed to treat them differently. The downzoning limitations are very new. As the assistant city attorney said, that rule only went into place at the end of 2024. So it hasn't actually been tested in the court system. So we're sort of in the Wild West here. So I do think that because these hyperscale data centers are industrial uses, so you know, let's be clear here. We're talking about massive facilities with huge utility needs and big local impacts. They need to be regulated as industrial uses and not allowed by right in places next to residences. I'll just say one last thing, council member, which is I heard a lot of people mention transparency, and I would say that that is a really big issue that needs to be addressed. And there are two things to think about there. The first is that Charlotte should make a commitment to never enter a non-disclosure agreement. There are some communities. I live in Hillsborough, North Carolina, which is a tiny town, but my town has committed to never, enter into a non-disclosure agreement, and that's one of the main top line recommendations from Loudoun County as well. And then the last point about transparency is to make sure that all applications for data centers include all of the information that your elected representatives need to make an informed decision. So making sure that they disclose all, everything about the planned facility, who's going to own it, how much energy it'll use, how much water, and so on and so forth. Because if you don't even know that basic information, you can't make an informed decision. So thank you so much for having me tonight.
Thank you. Great suggestions and recommendations, Megan. We appreciate your expertise. Kevin, you heard the concerns in this room tonight. What, if you can talk about what responsibility should the industry have to the community where it operates? And if additional infrastructure is necessary specifically because of a hyperscaler, who should pay for it?
Thank you, Councilmember Ajmera, and thank you to everyone that's here this evening for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this issue. I think that the headline here may be that the Digital Realty representative and the Southern Environmental Law Center representative agree on something. So I think that we should look to Loudoun County. While Digital Realty has been operating in Uptown Charlotte for more than 20 years, we've had a limited footprint. We're now in the process of expanding both at Morris Chapel and in Uptown. Well, we have a significant presence in Loudoun County. We probably have about 32 or 33 buildings there, including some that would qualify as hyperscale sites. If you haven't, if you're not familiar with Loudoun County, encourage you to look into it. What may surprise you is that Loudoun County is actually the wealthiest county in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Because of the data center industry, it has the highest paid teachers, it has the highest paid firefighters. It is accurate. And recently, the Department of Environmental Quality in Virginia came out with information. Loudoun County also has the healthiest population in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So it's really a great success story of how the data center industry and a community can work together for that benefit. Part of the reason why I'm also here today is because I understand that that we've had a limited footprint here and it's growing, so it's the unknown. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of information that's needed. I think we have a great story to tell about how we can go into a community, coexist with the community, and address the concerns. Completely agree that we have to be as transparent as possible. We do not ask localities to sign NDAs. As much information as we have available, we will provide that. We're already working with neighbors at Morris Chapel to address some of the concerns. Digital Realty has been doing this for a long time. The company's went public in 2004. So we've been building, owning, and operating data centers for more than 20 years. We know how to address concerns, whether it's lighting or noise, water, energy, all of that. You asked the question, who should pay if there's infrastructure that's necessary that's to be upgraded? We should pay for it. We want to pay. We've made that known publicly. Our business is to own and operate data centers and lease that space to our customers, not to have someone subsidize our water cost or our energy cost. We absolutely want to pay for that. So hopefully this will be a continuing conversation. I know that recently I brought a neighbor of the Morris Chapel site to Loudoun County, and we had nothing to hide. We went to the generator yard, saw the chillers, we saw all the infrastructure spaces, so that they could really understand what happens inside of a data center. We're going to work with a task force to bring them through our Uptown Charlotte location, and to bring some members of the Planning Commission through, so they can see the infrastructure that's inside of our building. We're going to be as open and honest with the community to try and get to a level of understanding.
Thank you. And let's give this panel a big round of applause. Also, I'll take an opportunity to recognize my colleague, Councilmember J.D. Mascara Arias, who represents East Charlotte. thank you all. We heard a lot tonight, and some things we agree on, and probably some things we do not. But I've heard a few things very clearly, and I look forward to working on those things. But before that, I do have questions. Alex is going to read those questions out loud, and then we will have staff. We have Angela Charles from Charlotte Water, as well as Heather. And do we have anyone here from planning? I know David was here. All right, I guess Heather will be the point person. Go ahead. Come on in. As you can tell, we got a lot of questions here.
Hi, everyone. Unfortunately, we won't be able to get to everyone's questions, but Councilmember Ajmera, she selected a few that she'd want like responses to. So the first one is, there are noise ordinances in Charlotte. Would these apply to data centers?
Yes, the noise ordinance would apply to data centers, and that is one of the things that the group is looking at, to possibly amend the noise ordinance to make it more specific to address the particular impacts of data centers.
Okay, perfect. If data centers can be built by right in certain locations and we don't know how much water they will use up front, how can we present data centers that will pull excessive water from Catawba? Sorry to get you up here again.
Good evening. We will know, data centers can come in two ways, by developers, or it can be like a straight Amazon or Apple. And so at some point in that development process, we will know the gallons requested from that entity, okay? And so it's at that point that we do that capacity assurance analysis to make sure that existing customers aren't penalized for this particular facility going online. That's how it works.
All right, now that we are in a 150-day moratorium, what happens if we still are not ready to move forward?
Yes. So this is where Charlotte City Council will make a decision. As I had mentioned to you, that I'm not married to this timeline. What I'm married to is that we got to get this right. This is going to be a consequential decision, and I will certainly work with my colleagues to make sure we get this right versus just meeting the timeline. So we have Councilmember J.D. Master-Arias here. He's also listening. My colleague, Councilmember Victoria Watlington, was also here. So we are all listening. All right, let's get to the next question.
All right, this is a two-part question. It says, can the city require specific building requirements on specific types of businesses? Requirements like solar panels and rainwater capture and waste heat recovery. And the second part of the question is, can the city require the new businesses to provide some services to city at a discount?
I didn't get the last part, but can you read the last part?
Yeah. It says, can the city require new businesses to provide some services to city at discounts?
So unfortunately, the answer to both of those is no. We can't require with certain building standards absent a change to an ordinance. So building standards are actually outlined in the county building ordinance. Our unified development ordinance outlines zoning and where things are located. And the only way the city has the authority to make any modifications to those things, we can't require it unless it's actually codified in one of those ordinances.
All right. This one, it's a little tricky to read. I'm gonna try my best. It says, what body governing person approves of by right.
I'll try that too. So, when you hear that something is allowed by right, that is sort of what I was just explaining. So if something is in our Unified Development Ordinance, it has a definition for it. It says where it can be located. It may have conditions attached to it, but that is allowed by right. What the council does every third Monday is listen to rezoning petitions, and that is where a certain business or a property owner wants to rezone their property to something that it's not zoned. And so if they can't do it by right, if it's not meeting the requirements of the zoning ordinance, sometimes they need to change what's allowed, and they do it per a rezoning. So
my question was really who approved of this by right in our area to allow these companies to come in by right and not have any public discourse with it. That's what I want to know. Who approved
oh, yes, ma'am. I understand what you're saying. So the Unified Development Ordinance is a document, it's proposed by the staff, and it was approved by the city council. So that's how by right developments are allowed. And the rezonings are also approved by council, but these are the type things, and both of the hyperscale data centers, by the way, went through the rezoning process. And so the rezoning process is a public process that does allow for community engagement and public hearings, and it just means that the council hears from the public before it approves a conditional rezoning. And so by right is just in the ordinance. Both are approved by council.
One more? Okay. Okay. What can the city council do to make sure data centers generate their own power and limit water use? Sorry, I can't read the last, but I think that's enough.
So I guess this question is for the city council.
Well, there is a lot that we do not know, as you can tell, when it comes to electricity grid, water, and quality of life. There is a lot that we are studying. And that's why I called for a pause, and it was unanimously approved by my colleagues on the Charlotte City Council. So we will continue to do our homework before we lift this moratorium. I hope that answers the question. Do we have more?
Yeah, I have one more.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Is there any discussion about updating the zoning around telecommunications, definitions, and parameters?
What was the first part? Is there
any discussion about updating the zoning around telecommunications, definitions, and parameters?
So as I said, during this period, as we study and gather information, we understand that this is a changing, evolving, emerging land use issue. And so it could be an opportunity to change the definition. I'll, go back and say that, yes, I'm probably a little more conservative than the attorney from the Southern Environmental Law Center, since I do represent the cities, and that the downzoning bill, we have found it to be pretty restrictive for us. And so if that bill were to give us a little more flexibility, we'd have a little more flexibility with the definition.
Are the water usage for these centers recycled, or are they discharged, and what pollutants come from them?
The pollutants is going to depend on the type of data center, but I did not say this earlier. A data center, a hyperscaler, because we got, different definitions. A hyperscaler will fall under our significant industrial use program. What that means is that they have to have a permit to discharge into the Charlotte water system. That discharge will be monitored for pollutants and limits will be set for that. Why do we do that? We do that to protect our wastewater treatment plants, to protect our pipelines, and protect our people. So when you look at the categories of customers that we have in our system, there's a category called SIU. That is significant industrial user. They will fall in that category. They will be monitored. They will be inspected. Their discharges will be monitored. And let's say, you know, they have this process called blowdown. That's when they get rid of the recycled water. Well, do you want it all at one time, or do you want to do what they call attenuation? Okay, where you slowly get it to protect the system. So I know I've said a lot of technical stuff. I think the bottom line is that they will be monitored as industrial users, which is what you heard Attorney Kimball say, right? Into our system for protection of our system and our people, because our people have to go in the sewers too, right? So we don't want pollutants in there that would harm our own folks. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, absolutely. Hyperscalers, SIUs.
All right, next question. Data centers cooling system uses recycled water, meaning that we will still take from a source. Is this sustainable for the community? Will this deplete our water?
I think it is, because the objective here is we want to expand our reclaimed water system anyway. Because why are we taking drinking water and putting it on our lawns? Because we love our green grass, right? And landscaping. Whereas in other communities, they are using reclaimed water systems. So I think it's sustainable, and I think we've got to grow it. We have the system now at Tradition Golf Course, and we have an agreement with UNC Charlotte for reclaimed water already. We need to expand that, and I'm calling them water products, but we need to expand that throughout the surface area, and the university area is the most likely place. So I do think long-term, it's a sustainable and more efficient use of our water resources.
Another water question. We are in a, you're popular. We are in a drought here. How can we let data centers come here, deplete our water supply?
Yes, so now any data centers, because we're in stage 2 now, right? So data centers will be required to be a part of that process, okay? So as I mentioned before, we have manufacturers in our community. We have other what we call high water users in our community. And so when we have drought and we ask folks to conserve, that's all customer classes. That's all customer classes, okay? So that's what I would call the drought connection, is that the requirements that we ask the community to abide by, those requirements apply to everybody. Do you have another one?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
You're popular. Another drought question. What
Yes.
happens if there is a severe drought? Will data centers need to be priority over citizens?
Data centers are not priorities over citizens, and I hope you guys have gotten that. Okay, so our goal is we have to serve people. Okay, we are required to serve people. Okay, that's why we have a capacity assurance program. That's why we talk about water efficiency. Okay, now we're a growing community, so yes, we're going to have economic development, we're going to have schools, we have hospitals, we have a whole lot of uses. All right, but there won't be this, I don't know the best way to say it, we will not have data centers at the expense of our people and customer base. And from a regulatory standpoint, we won't be able to do it anyway, okay?
Ma'am, last night in the task force meeting, a representative from the attorney's office, I asked him point blank, we can be fined as individuals by water. Can data centers be fined? He looked right at me and he said, no. Isn't that?
He's here.
Is that the case? Or did I misunderstand?
In regards to the situation, we have to have a ordinance basis for fining a data center. Just because they're in existence, we can't just try to fine them for any water use in that regard. So across the board, doesn't matter if you're a data center, you're a food establishment, you have to have a violation of the ordinance before we have the legal right to fine you to begin with. So again, we have to apply this equally in that regard. That's the law that's applied by not only the city of Charlotte, but also under the constitutional principles. So that's why.
So they can be held financially responsible if in
If
case of.
they violate the ordinance, as my colleague Therese said before, and as the members of council have established, if there's violations of the ordinance, we do have mechanisms under the ordinance to actually enforce those violations. So we're not going to exclude them from enforcement just because they're in the community. If they violate, yes, we have other opportunities under the ordinance, under the law to enforce once a violation has occurred. But their very presence, that's
No. What we talked about last night was the water restrictions that are currently taking place for residential.
Yes.
That's everybody.
Yeah, they were in somehow, way, shape, form, they were, let's say, watering the front of their lawn, outside of restrictions. Yes, they can be fined just like everyone else that is. If they're using more water for the data centers internally, they would then pay that for more consumption use as everybody else. Again, we don't have necessarily, we're not at a stage of everybody being penalized more. Because again, as Angela Charles alluded to, right now stage 2, we got stage 3 or 4. That would be a different situation where we can invoke emergency powers that we're not there yet to do all of what you're saying.
Also, our sewer use ordinance. Remember, I talked about SIU and monitoring those discharges. So companies that violate that get fined. That's everybody.
Right.
Okay.
Maybe Angela, if you can.
Oh, you
have
got another one?
with Christopher, and then to address his questions. We have a few
Absolutely.
more water questions.
Oh, you have more water? I thought we was getting out at 8 o'clock.
You're popular.
Okay.
Okay, I think we touched on this briefly, but someone asked, are there real consequences for data centers overusing water, especially if it's on a consistent overuse basis? Financial consequences most likely won't deter major corporations.
Okay, I'm trying to get the gist. When you say overuse water, we'll be providing a certain amount. Okay, based upon what they need. You know, it's just like a house, right? When you open your tap, you know you're gonna get pressure and flow, right? When everybody flushed this morning, right? You knew you had the right pressure and flow, right, to take it away and send it to Charlotte Water. So it's the same process. So I'm a little bit, confused about, yeah.
We'll come back to you. There'll be a few more questions.
Okay, all right.
When did the moratorium begin?
It began on June the 8th.
Okay. Is there a possibility of reinstating a new moratorium?
State law allows for an extension of a moratorium. There are certain requirements that have to be met. You have to show that you proceeded in good faith to accomplish all you said you were going to do during the original moratorium, and there have to be changes in facts and circumstances to substantiate an extension. But an extension is possible.
Perfect. Where exactly are the 3 existing data centers located?
Yes, I think this one we addressed.
Oh.
All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, this one. Okay.
The data center expansion has resulted in the largest union construction workers growth this century. Additionally, the supply chain in parts manufacturing has hired thousands across North Carolina, including at union facilities like Corning. Is it possible for the city to support these jobs and community needs without completely stopping this industry?
I know that came from Sebastian, union representative. Um, I think, as I mentioned during the opening statement, that economic development and quality of life, we have to do both. It's not either or, but it should not come at the expense of our communities or one community paying too much. And I think that's where the balance is. And I think that's where we are doing our homework to make sure we get this right, Sebastian.
Is there any way the state legislature can preempt or override any protections, regulations Charlotte-Mecklenburg creates regarding data centers?
Can the state preempt? If we were to do something that the state said was in violation of state law, they absolutely, yes, could, would hold us accountable.
Yes, but I guess if you can speak to, can state take away some of the protections that local government has put in place in the past? I know there have been examples. Yes, they can. We are the creator of the state.
That's true. They, the General Assembly has the authority and the power to make laws. They have been known to make laws that take certain rights away from cities, just as they grant rights, they can take them away from cities.
All right. What is the permitting process for new data centers? Is there one database of all standalone data centers approved prior to the moratorium?
Yes, and so because data centers are approved by right, the city has a database called Excella. And so I'm looking at Dave, I think I'm right. I think the Excella database would be the repository for all the existing data centers. If they were built before, Excella. But the Excella database is where where the permitting process to allow for data centers is located right now. That's paused for new data centers.
Climate experts advise no new investment in fossil fuel projects to avoid further climate crisis. Can data centers be built and operate using solely renewable energies, solar, geothermal, and wind? So solar, geothermal, and wind, just renewable energy totally. So we did and I'm sorry to tell y'all, but even if we put solar panels on every single building in the city of Charlotte, it would not be enough to power the buildings in the city of Charlotte. And that's just the truth. And so, however, there are lots of different things that data centers can do, and some do to address those issues. So their electricity, I would bet, is probably their largest expense. And so they're motivated to get that under control, right? But so good data centers will employ energy saving opportunities all over the place. The Department of Energy has a guide for data center development that has how to do that. Additionally,
as I shared before, it's really important for data centers to support renewable energy in their utilities portfolio, even though they can't meet all of their needs on site.
All right, next question. There are 2.2 GW of data centers not in the moratorium. When will the city of Charlotte have enough evidence of imminent harm to add these to the moratorium?
So the moratorium ordinance specifically says that certain projects that had approval prior to the moratorium would not be part of the moratorium. That is per state law. So the city has no discretion with respect to that. And so those data centers that were approved prior to the institution of the moratorium are exempt from the moratorium. The imminent harm is an exception to those exemptions, if you will. So an imminent harm is the threshold is that you have to show, I don't have it in front of me, but immediate harm. There are certain legal standards that have to be met based on project-specific scientific evidence about those particular data centers in order for the imminent harm standard to be met.
Thank you, Terry. Okay, this question is for all speakers. So we'll start with speakers. Just simply yes or no question. Would you live near a data center and how close? All right, we'll start with Terry.
I mean, I think I'm human, just like I'm an attorney, but I really am human, just like like Colin said earlier. And I think that what we're learning through this process, and I agree with this gentleman here, is that what we do have is a lot of unknowns. Our phones, because we are researching this project, we're learning about all the potential harms and the negative impacts of data centers, and that can be very scary. And because I'm working for the city, though, I also hear the other side. I hear the digital realty side, and I hear about the necessity for them. And so I would say that what I would want to know is scientifically, data-driven information about the harms, so that as a city we can make the best decision about where they're located. And so that would apply to me as well as, I'd want it to apply to everyone in the room because we're concerned about the community as a whole. And what I will say again is, what I know is that we are bound by what the state allows us to do. And so it's difficult for me to answer that because we are kind of hamstrung right now by what the state will allow.
All right. Well, that question should not have been asked of city staff. So let's go with Robert. You can, yeah, go ahead.
Hopefully I don't have to just say no, because it's the only question we've been asked, but the answer would be no, but most of you will not be the ones living near it. They're going to be in poor black and brown neighborhoods mostly. And it's going to be an addition to vape shops, liquor stores, data centers. So unless we change the UDO, add data centers to vape shops.
Answer is no. I would not live next to a hyperscale data center, and we're already seeing lawsuits across the country against data centers by residents because of the noise and the pollution. So that's why these protections need to be in place.
I think you kind of are going to know which way I'm going to go with this. My answer is yes, with a caveat. I would live next to a data center if it was appropriately sited and there was mitigation in place for the lights that are on the building. I live about 2 miles from a data center.
Is that a hyperscaler?
It's on the verge of being a hyperscale. It's probably about I would say about 76 megawatts, so not quite hyperscale, but it's a large data center. I spend the majority of my time throughout the week inside of a data center, so I mean I'm very comfortable around them. But I think when sited properly and with all the things in place that we know how to mitigate the impact on the surrounding area, you absolutely can there. I mean, the reality is that if you look at, again, I'll just go back to Loudoun County, there's neighborhoods that are well into the millions of dollars that continue to increase in value, and they're probably within a half a mile of 100 to 150 data centers. The same thing in Santa Clara out on the West Coast. That's another hub of data centers. These are very wealthy areas where the data centers have been properly sited, they've been mitigated, and they've been able to coexist with the community. I understand the concerns, they're legitimate, but there's a way that we can work together to address those and then ultimately have a benefit in the community, that we're generating tax revenue, that we're investing in local community nonprofits so that the long-term benefits are recognized.
All right, okay. I, I, I hear the passion here in the room. But let me tell you, this conversation does not end here tonight. This is just the first of many conversations. We can have economic opportunity and protect our quality of life, and we should demand both. And that's what I'm committed to doing. So the question here is whether growth happens to us or whether we shape it. And I believe we have an important responsibility to shape that growth. So let's do this together. Now let's take what we have heard tonight and turn it into action. But I appreciate you, all of you coming here today. I know most of the things we agree on, some things we do not, but there are a few things that I've heard very clearly. Protect our water, protect our power grid, protect our neighborhoods, make sure growth pays its own way, and give residents a voice before the decisions are made, not after. Did I capture that correctly? All right. Well, I commit to continuing this work. I really appreciate all of you being here tonight and staying here till the end. Thank you all. And last, and let's give a big hand to my Chief of Staff, Alexis Rojas. And the entire constituent relations team, as Amanda Birch and the entire team, give them a big round of applause. Thank you.
Okay, you've been watching Charlotte Now.tv coverage of the City of Charlotte's Data Center Town Hall at beautiful Project 658 venue. My name is Christopher John Scalise, and we are just wrapping this broadcast up here for you, giving a voice in this most important topic. Join us online. Place your comments in the thread. Thank you so much for watching.